I was asked to judge a competition for a camera club, and that's pretty much where it all went wrong. The theme for their competition was ICM, which is why they asked me to judge. I have some experience with the technique, and I've shared a few videos on ICM here before, so I said yes. And as we drew closer to the actual event, I realized what a huge mistake I had made. Instead of helping a few dozen amateur photographers find ways to move forward with their craft, what I was faced with was an excruciating evening of detailed critique, exploring trivial differences between one photo and another. My job was to tell folks what they could have done to make the photo better, as if somehow the answer to creativity and expression might be hiding deep inside the photo itself. The more I thought about how to offer my thoughts on the night, the more depressed I was about being any part of the process. I found myself asking, is there a better way to judge a competition? What I enjoy about photography is creating stuff. I like making beautiful things. Judging a comp is the exact opposite of going out and being creative. When I take photographs, I often look at my shots and I think, that's a bit rubbish, and deem to throw it away. It's no big deal. When you judge someone else's photo, however, there's an ever-present risk of crushing someone's creative spirit with your indifference. Rejection is not fun. When I shoot for myself and fail, then it's only myself I disappoint. Most people enter competitions because they want their work to be appreciated, not necessarily because they're looking for critical feedback or to learn how to do it better. As a path for improving your photography, competitions are way overrated. You may even call them toxic. There were two main categories to the images that I was judging for this particular club. There was an open category and then the ICM theme. There were some great examples of the craft in the ICM collections that I judged, and there were some that were not. Some images were just blurry. They weren't even blurred by movement, but just out of focus. Some appeared to be multiple shots layered on top of each other instead of a single image captured in the camera. That seemed a little odd to me. That seems like cheating. Keep in mind, this club does allow people to enter digital art alongside the photography when they're running competitions. And I don't care for that. In general, I have an issue with judging photography compositions where composite and regular photographs are mixed in without attribution. I think it's unfair on the viewer not to be aware of the technique and the provenance of that image. And we judge an image differently knowing it was a composite of several images. That's a different category. That's no longer just a photograph. The reason they invited me to judge this particular month was ICM. And I do love this technique, and it opens up a lot of creativity for any photographer. ICM removes so much of the technical layers that we have a tendency to overfocus on with photography. It's that freedom of expression that I enjoy about ICM. And that freedom of expression makes it hard to judge. How do I tell one person, sorry, your expression is too free and I don't like it? What I ended up deciding on was to assess the ICM on the basis of, is the movement transforming the scene or is it just a blurry photo? Was there an intentional element or just movement for the sake of movement? Is the expression of the photographer evident within the image? Because where art and photography meet is the act of expression. I have some issues with competitions in general anyway. I think they suck. I even wrote a chapter in my book called Why Competitions Suck. The idea of judging a single image is especially not my idea of helpful. I prefer to look at a curated set of work and have a chance to delve more deeply into the story of the artist. One single image compared to another is a deeply flawed approach. It puts too much focus on the idea of a perfect image instead of leaving room for excellence and narration. If a single image can tell 1,000 words, then I want to read the whole book. I don't just want one page. ICM stands for intentional camera movement, and the key word is intentional. When I look at an ICM image, I want to get a sense that the image created is an expression of the photographer, which is why some kind of transformation of the scene is so important. The act of transforming the light to capture something that is not otherwise seen, that's the entire point of the technique, because there's now another layer obscuring the intention of the photographer. It's the intention of the editing. Double exposures in the camera, for example, they're a joy because they reveal a careful and thoughtful process from the photographer. They made an effort that goes beyond merging layers in Photoshop. In-camera double exposure is very different challenge to post-processing double exposure. Just layering two images on top of each other in Photoshop, that feels different. Some of the images I was judging appeared as though they were merged in Photoshop, not in camera. And I know many people will listen to this and tell me, what difference does it make? And I say it makes all the difference in the world. It really does. One is an expression of editing skills. The other is photography. The connection between the photographer and the final image is very different in these two cases. One is trying to copy an effect. The other is stepping into the process to find expression. I really think this matters, especially for a camera club. And what I'm seeing is many camera clubs treating digital art as equivalent to photography, which is a huge trap and I think a mistake. Once you give up on the distinction, then you lose so much of the value of photography as an act of expression. Indeed, you may as well just generate everything with an AI prompt if the provenance of an image is not of value. If the intention of the photographer is no longer valued, then why bother with cameras when anything you wish for can be generated by text prompt? The very fact that someone took the photo is what makes it valuable. Why they took the photo is what makes that photo interesting. The image is a reflection of the artist's intent. That's what draws me to an image. The intent, expressing your intent, is the act of making art. The reason so much of digital art is boring to me is that lack of intent. They're hollow, they're vacuous, they are devoid of meaning. The artists are setting out to mimic a scene, not deliver a message. I don't think they have to be hollow, but the ease of creation has flooded the internet with a very low standard. We now see so much art that is created for the sake of creating art. There's no point to it. And it's not really art at all, if you get my drift. There are some truly marvelous digital artists out there whose work I really love. Eric Johansson, for example, his work is exceptional, whimsical, thoughtful, and there's depth to his ideas. You look at his images and you know it's not a real photograph. You know you've stepped into an alternative reality, but you also know there's a point to it. There is a message. His work is beautiful and it is powerful. Digital art has a place. For those who are stepping deeper into the world of ICM, please focus on the intentional part. That's where the joy is. That's where the technique really shines. Think about why movement matters, how it relates to the subject you are capturing, how the subtle variations in your hand generate something quite different and transformative. If you don't like the word intention, think of the word motivation. What is motivating the movement? ICM is not movement for the sake of movement. It is intentional. It is motivated. And it results in something that is transformative. Once you have intention, it can lead you to some amazing places. Ironically, might even lead you somewhere you didn't even intend at all. Yes, you can still find serendipity through intention. In fact, you find a lot more unexpected joy when you remove all the hurdles from your creative process. Think of this as the harder I work, the luckier I get. Now I find myself in a quandary with my obligation to this camera club. I don't want to let them down, but equally, I don't want to spend an entire evening going through every image one by one and looking for a skerrick of critique to offer. I feel this is a very poor way to help anyone move forward with their photography. Taking a single photo in isolation is neither an effective way to assess a photographer, nor an effective way to offer guidance for improvement. Putting aside my preference for curating sets instead of a single image, what's missing here is the context of the capture. When I go to a gallery to see someone's work, I have an understanding of who that photographer is and what their journey is. We experience the images in a context defined by the photographer themselves. Same goes for a magazine story illustrated by someone like myself. The photos are in the context of travel journalism or lifestyle editorial or whatever. They are not random, they are not solitary. Submitting photos to a competition feels totally arbitrary to me. It feels contrived and isolated from the intent and spirit of the artist. It is a context I don't enjoy. When I offer advice to photographers on a workshop, we are drawing from intimate knowledge of how they captured that image and their thought process and their mood and the location and what it is they are struggling with and what they are trying to reach for. None of that is present when judging images for a camera club. All of that is stripped away to make the photos stand alone. The very thought of standing in front of a room of people and walking through my petty complaints about how they composed a shot or what they could have done different, it's rubbish. It's not helpful. That's the worst way I can think of to help people. It is not constructive. What I really want to do with any club presentation is talk about the creative process, not an equation for f-stops or rules for composition, but a discussion on being creative and giving yourself permission to try things and fail. A discussion on the reality of what it feels like to stand on the beach with your camera and have absolutely no idea what you are doing. And in that moment, you ask yourself, what am I trying to do here? What is my inspiration? What is driving me forward? Where is the joy in this process? Why am I taking this photo? Why? Because why is far more interesting than how. If more clubs could just let go of the technical rigidity for just a little bit, they might find more space for joy in the art of photography. They might be able to better reach people who are looking to enjoy the experience. I think camera clubs are at their best when they emphasize companionship more than competition. When people get to enjoy capturing with some colleagues instead of being judged by strangers. That's where these clubs do their best, by coming together. And that's the same for presenting your photography. It should never be about a single image. It should always be a collection of work, and how those images work together and connect with each other. Curating a set of images is a far more rewarding task than trying to capture one perfect image. Curating a story is about depth and nuance and attention. You can curate a bunch of photos taken on your iPhone or your Hasselblad. I don't care. It makes no difference really. What matters is the story you are telling and the reason you picked that story. When you express your story through a set of images, we end up with something special, and it doesn't matter if your technical skill is better or worse than someone else. Not everything in this world needs to be ranked and scored and judged. You can develop your skills by nurturing a sense of kindness and sharing, by feeling a little joy for the craft. Photography is a conversation, not a frozen moment. I'm recording this section after the club event, and I didn't give them exactly what they asked for. I went along and made them a presentation of my own that moved through some of my thoughts about some of their photos and where those photos connect with my foundations for creativity and intention. The main theme was still ICM after all, so that gave me an excuse to go hard on intent. The first thing that was really impressive about this club was the depth of teaching they had in their monthly program. They'd put up a slide on the screen at one stage with a list of all the stuff that was coming up. They had a lot going on in the ways of reviews and courses and outings. They had a lot of opportunity to learn. So that's really important, that the competition format wasn't their only path to teaching. It's just that whenever you ask for guidelines on judging a club competition, the approach they usually suggest is, please say something nice about the photo and suggest what you might do different. Make it a learning opportunity. Like I've said already, competitions are a dreadful way to encode a learning opportunity. My vision for better photography won't suit everyone, and that came through in the questions. There were some good questions for me from the crowd. One fellow outlined his appreciation for serendipity over planning. He's not a fan of planning for 3 years to line up a single shot. His insight was offered after I had suggested that as you bring intention into your photography, you also start the opportunity to plan your photography outings as well. Creativity is not about reacting to the moment, it's about finding your path towards a bigger goal. We achieve big results through lots of small steps. My take on serendipity is simply to observe that the harder I work, the luckier I get. I was also challenged on the success of intent when your work is being observed by different audiences. It was suggested to me that if you're telling a story with your photography, then the real measure of success will be how well your message comes across to your audience. So this guy was saying that my ICM images made a lot more sense to him once I explained how it was captured. So therefore, the photo by itself failed to deliver its message. This is fundamentally not what I'm getting at when I say intention. You're not delivering intention, you are motivated by intention. It is driving your expression. And what I express through an image begins with my intent. At the other end of the process, what any audience may interpret from my images will vary hugely. I can't control that. The same image might inspire very different emotions or understanding from different people. This applies to detailed photojournalism images just as much as an abstract ICM. If you look back at photos in the late 1800s where people were taking pictures of their slaves as proof of kindness towards their chattel, over a century later, I look at those same photos with a lot more critical interpretation. How we see that image changes over time and changes depending on the audience. During my review, I got a chance to talk to many people about the process of their captures. In each case, that little bit of insight elevated my appreciation for the image every time, which is part of my issue with club competitions, the way they separate the provenance of a photograph from the judging. I appreciate that the scale of entries and the format of competitions makes bringing the provenance in something that's hard to achieve, but I would rather embrace the provenance if I have the chance. And when I think about what that gentleman told me, that he enjoyed my ICM once he understood the process, it underlines that the more you understand about the photographic process, the more you can enjoy the finished work. I finished off my presentation with just one image of my own, an ICM taken in Punakha, Bhutan. And while I stood there with my image up on the screen talking about intent and expression, it occurred to me that the reason I was invited that night to talk was essentially because a few people were inspired by this very photograph captured 12 months ago in the Himalayas. I think the photo did its job. It made a connection and inspired a few people and sent those people out into the world to try this technique themselves. The value of the photo doesn't just lie inside the image itself, but what you do with the image and what stories you narrate with it. Whatever intention I had at the time of capturing that image, I could not have predicted just how far the image might travel across the internet or across the city or amongst an audience in this camera club. And so I often like to point out, photography is not a frozen moment. It is a conversation. And that's what One Camera Club got plenty of this week. Thank you for joining me for this video. Please subscribe and hit the like button and all that stuff. Have a great day out there capturing photos and enjoying the process and art of photography.